Hello, hello, hello. This is Hyoun Park, and welcome to our TEM Expo webinar number 1, 6 stages CIOs must consider to manage COVID IT. Thanks so much for showing up, and given that how we start meetings now in the age of Corona, I'm going to start by asking you, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Feel free to let me know how you're feeling, either by sending a question from the audience and providing your feedback, or just letting me know afterwards. But it's great to at least be able to virtually be with you. As you may see, we've got a couple of different things going on here. I think there's a poll below the webinar as well. Just curious to see how you're doing and how you are dealing with this weird working environment we're in. So feel free to participate there as well. So, anyways, this is all kidding aside, this is a pretty serious topic, and it's been one that I've been taking very seriously over the past month. Here's the world as it has been looking like to me. First of all, let's be honest. There's only 3 things that I've taken questions on for the most part over the past month: conserving cash, supporting remote workers, and protecting the company. But it's this really interesting mix because in this work from home world we're at, one day it'll be a company, telecom manager from a multi-billion-dollar company asking, what do I need to do next? The next day, you're literally setting up Zoom settings for your colleagues or your neighbors. So it's this very interesting mix of personal and corporate that happens, and that's just kind of where we are right now. And the challenge here is that we have some really huge challenges right now. The U.S. unemployment rate is expected to rise to 15% in April, a post-World War II high. Prior to this, we were cruising along, talking about 5%, 4%, 3%, wondering whether there was even going to be real unemployment. So it's a huge change. And just in sheer numbers, 22 million Americans have filed out for unemployment over the past 4 weeks. In context, 143 million taxpayers total in 2017, which is the last year we have great numbers for. So just the numbers involved are intimidating, frankly, and you wonder, what can we do about this? What can we do to help bring 15% of the workforce back? And here's the honest truth. We are in IT, we're in finance, we're in accounting. If you're at this webinar, this is probably one of the 3 roles that you're in, because these are the people who I talk to most often. But let's be honest. We're not the CEOs. We're not the government. There's only so much we can do. And then, in this context, we can't change the world, but we can be business stewards. There are things that we can do to help set up our business to be better in this time of need. So in that, regard, one of the most tactical things I've been thinking about, and one of the places where I've been getting questions, especially over the past couple of weeks, you're about to receive your first set of IT bills in the time of Corona. Set of costs that make up 3 to 4% of your receipts on average and reflect the new normal of usage that you've got. Now think about that. You've got all these people that are, in the worst case scenario, you've had to lay off or furlough people, or you've been moving people to work from home and increasing that number of that technology exponentially. You've been dealing with MiFis that are going up against their data limits, or you're dealing with new devices, or you're dealing with everybody using their home computers and trying to get access to things that just don't allow people to go in. All sorts of challenges here. And based on that, are you ready? Do you know what to do next? Is that something that you can, do you know what you're going to be doing? And I think that's been a real challenge. And, we're going to talk about why that's a real challenge as well. So as we get there, what can we do to prepare for the future? I'm just going to say, I've been thinking about this, and just so you know where I'm coming from here, I've been doing this for 20 years, either on the carrier side, on the IT side, and now as an industry analyst. I remember starting my career back in the dot-com bust, and then afterwards, remembering moving into a new line of work in the 2008 time period when we had the recession. And I've remembered each time what happened that worked, what happened that didn't work, and what were the little things that I could have done in my job that could have made the company easier. And these things weigh on me, especially now when we're in a practical position to make a difference once again after, frankly, several years where cost was less important and we were dealing with other issues and trying to figure out what else we could do in our roles. Now the world has come back to us in terms of dealing with IT costs, IT expenses, and being able to make a difference in cash flow and the fundamental challenges that our businesses face. So from my perspective, here's what I've been showing people the last month or so in terms of evaluating where people are and what they need to do next. This is kind of a starting point that I use to figure out how mature companies are in their remote and COVID preparation and where they need to focus themselves right now. And stage one here is around Shadow IT Edition Survivor, and definitely just about literally making sure that you can do your work. Frankly, if you have your employees, that third of the workforce that is now working from home can't get to work, your company can't do anything. Second is around securing your business. Third is around auditing your environment. Fourth is around training and celebrating best practices. There's a people aspect to this that has become increasingly obvious over the past few weeks as we've all tried to figure out the new normal and from a collaborative perspective. Next is around standardizing and improving your environment. And then finally, it's around transforming your business. And from a general perspective, when we think about this, here's kind of the time frames that we've been putting to this. The stage one, there's a few weeks where we've all been fumbling, quite frankly, and trying to do anything other than survival was honestly kind of a foolish enterprise. You could say, oh, it's time to go about with digital transformation and go through life as usual and use our normal security protocols, but you would have been fighting a fool's errand because definitely at least a third of your workforce, maybe more, maybe 100%, is trying to figure out this new normal. And even those who have been used to working from home are now dealing with their neighbors also being home, or their children also being home, or having to be a school teacher from 9 to 5. All of these challenges are real and require shifting the way you do your normal 9 to 5 job, or being able to access data in new ways, or being able to use the apps that actually work rather than those that are so blocked off by security that they're not functional. So this is kind of what I've been telling people. And as you can tell, there are different time frames. Stages 1 and 2 around just fumbling along while trying to figure out how to secure your business had to happen immediately. And then we start getting to these next two stages around auditing the new normal and figuring out how people are succeeding. And we're starting to get to the point where standardizing and improving is going to be important. And I think it's important to stage this correctly, because if you try to do everything at once, you're not going to be successful. This is really about trying to figure out how to do this, how to tier and stage your activities correctly for success. It doesn't mean that you ignore every other stage while you're in one stage, but just this is a realistic expectation of what's been happening, and based on how this worked the last couple of times that we were in recessions, as well as the human challenges of moving to remote work. So, stage 1, Survivor, Shadow IT Edition, as I've been calling it. This is a time of massive and continuous change where we are not only trying to figure out how to work from home and make that cultural change, but literally the rules that we have for either working with each other or the tools that we use, or even the rules about going outside have been changing on a day-to-day basis. We've all seen how quickly Zoom was celebrated, and then the next week, Zoom was the biggest security issue ever, and then the week after that, oh, Zoom is suddenly taking security seriously, and now, and then you start moving to a different conferencing solution, and you find out that other conferencing solution has the exact same issues that you were worried about with Zoom. It's just this constant change that is happening. Just one example. Another example: are we wearing masks outside? Are we not wearing masks outside? On all these little differences make a huge difference on how we deal with our work, because the more things you have to prioritize from a cognitive perspective, the less time you have to worry about things like, well, what is my security policy and how do I protect corporate assets? Obviously, all that falls down in terms of your priorities, compared to how do I make sure my kid is fed at lunch and ready to do their schoolwork. And when you think about these challenges, there's this thing called the Holmes-Rahe scale, basically looking at stress events. And when you look at these things, death of spouse, divorce, marital separation, detention, personal injury, marriage, being fired, reconciliation, work retirement, these are all aspects that we are threatened with in this combination of pandemic and recession. Yes, you could get laid off. Yes, a loved one could get sick. And these things can change from day to day. And because all of this is happening at once, we have massive stress, leading to the need to be able to support employees and get them up and running first. So I can't emphasize that enough, that this is the stage that we are just starting to exit right now, but it's important to acknowledge that this is what happened. We had a month of chaos, a month of completely unorganized and unmanaged technology, and it's okay because that's where everybody was. But at the same time, let's assume that that's where everybody was, instead of pretending that we had these wonderful corporate processes that allowed for perfect governance and compliance of all things necessary in the enterprise. So next up, we had to look at how to secure the business as well, because stress leads to vulnerability. There have been many consumer complaints for fraud. There's potential for malware and ransomware. Frankly, as employees have been moving to home, you start relaxing a bit more than you used to. You may be using your home computer instead of your corporate computer. You may not be wearing pants when you take your meeting. Who knows? It's got a completely different environment than what you've been used to doing. And as you relax, it also makes it much harder to maintain that defense mechanism that you might have from a corporate perspective. Somebody calls you up, you might just answer them, especially if they say, hey, this is Bob from IT. And I need your name to do X, Y, Z. You haven't been thinking about this because you have 38 other things that are more important to you. And then in that moment of weakness, bam. And then when that happens, we have problems. So we have problems with securing the business across all of the technical aspect that we have across telecom, network, mobility, SaaS, data. And we've been seeing that from a practical perspective. The FTC has been dealing with this. Right now, they have over 22,000 reports of COVID-based complaints, basically fraud associated with some sort of COVID-based fraud. So the bad guys are coming out in force and smelling weakness and trying to get through. This is on the consumer level. You can only imagine the stakes on the corporate level as well. So phishing for email addresses, looking for the potential for other issues, and being able to get through, and instead of $557 in fraud loss, for a company that could easily become thousands, millions, because frankly, the black hat and the bad guys are not going to stop in this time of COVID. And just because you're using consumer grade technologies and allowing that doesn't mean that hackers are going to stop trying to get in. So, and at the corporate level, we're seeing headlines such as ransomware strikes biotech firm researching COVID-19 treatments. Below, you can see hospitals and healthcare providers increasingly being targeted with ransomware attacks. they are actively going after the targets that they feel are most vulnerable. And in that is the context for thinking about security in today's COVID environment. Third of all, once we get a basic level of security in and we tell people, hey, watch out for this stuff, people are coming after you from both the personal and corporate perspective. It's time to clean things up. We have to figure out, okay, what got ordered over the last month? What actually got used? Where did we get overages? Where did we end up having some crazy month of bills? And how are we going to prepare for this level of usage for the next few months, potentially over the next year, depending on how work from home policies and other issues end up going into place, which require a longer term contract perspective. This cleanup is going to be a necessary piece of the puzzle, and this is where we start to shine in terms of our IT, our accounting, our sourcing practices, and being able to bring that back to the company in terms of cash flow, in terms of governance, and in terms of, frankly, doing the jobs where we provide value. So, that auditing is going to be an important piece of the puzzle. This is an important concept for me. This idea that purposeful, meaningful, quantifiable visible business contribution is now more important in a global pandemic recession of uncertain length. We have to know how to quantify what we're doing. We have to be able to talk about what matters. We have to be able to show how we're contributing. Obviously there's a lot of pressure in a recession to figure out how do people contribute to the bottom line? How do people actually do their jobs? And is their ability to do their jobs compromised by whatever work environment exists for any reason? So this is the time to start figuring out, okay, here's the areas where I can contribute from a purposeful and meaningful way to this business. Next up, once all of that is figured out from an audit perspective, it's time to standardize and improve. So, for instance, in this past month, I am absolutely sure that every company here has bought multiple versions of at least one application. There are probably multiple devices that have gone to individuals because you weren't sure whether they needed a device or a laptop or a tablet for any specific reason. All sorts of reasons that standardization now is necessary. So on that left side, you can see around vendor consolidation and standardizing employee services. We're going to have this new definition of standardizing employee services because now we need different types of technology to support remote work. That's absolutely fine, but it's time to figure out what that is. In the middle, it's also time to think about onboarding and training materials as well as the actual policies associated with remote work. And what worked when we had 5% of our work population being permanent work from home is different from where we are now, where 40% of our population is work from home on an everyday basis. Everything that worked at that other order of magnitude does not work at this order of magnitude. So it's time to start exploring this. And then on the right side, you can see from a contract negotiations perspective, this is a great time to be able to re-explore payment terms, disputes, business continuity, and figure out what you're responsible for, what you're not responsible for, and frankly, how to not get screwed over when the carrier or the vendor starts trying to bill you on an automated basis or to hold you to a minimum requirement that may not be necessary or reflect your current company's real needs. So there's this really interesting challenge there. And I think that's going to be a huge opportunity for smart companies to do this correctly and really provide value to the bottom line in the next 3 to 6 months. Those annual renewals are even more important now than they have been in the past, because it's not just about getting your extra 2 to 3% discount, but about terms that fundamentally protect the company's ability to maintain work and flexibility in a time when we need that desperately. So finally, transforming the business. You might think, isn't business transformation a frivolous exercise at this time? And isn't this a stupid buzzword that we should really get away from as we're trying to focus on more practical issues? But it's been interesting to see, though, if you look at kind of the polling metrics. PwC recently polled several hundred CFOs and found that obviously the majority of them are considering workforce cuts, but only 15% are considering customer experience cuts and 25% are considering digital transformation cuts. They are still thinking about how to automate, digitize, and improve customer experiences, supply chain, the ability to enact work. So it's still important to empower companies digitally, and to the extent that IT investments can be aligned to improving that digital response or that customer centricity, it's going to really improve the positioning for your role in particular, personally, as well as your department's role in helping the company out. Align your work and your department's work to strategic initiatives with long-term value that can't easily be shut on and off. Don't just make yourself an audit person or a bill processor. Think about what you can do with that information and that inventory information, that contract information, the invoice terms, what you can do to be sure that you are maintaining cash flow and improving business capabilities. Another poll, obviously, Gartner, the 800-pound gorilla in the analyst space, they did their own CFO survey revealing that they said 74% of CFOs intend to shift some employees to remote work permanently. And this survey was actually several weeks ago, saying that they would plan to shift at least 5% of previous on-site employees to permanently remote positions. That's actually a pretty conservative number, considering that we're currently at 40% of on-site employees going back home. You're saying that, okay, of those, only call it 10% of those are going to stay at home. I think the number is going to be much higher, not only because we are creating the infrastructure to be able to do that, but also because just from a personal perspective, when you look at introverts versus extroverts, about 25 to 40% of people consider themselves to be introverts. Obviously, these people are more likely to perhaps want their own space and might be more willing to stay at home. And since CFOs look at this from a real estate and plant and equipment perspective, that might be something that they agree to. So, there might be this very interesting shift where, Gartner said at least 5%, very conservative estimate. It might end up being closer to, 10%, 15%, which ends up being a big shift in increasing the amount of remote technology investment necessary while removing the real estate investment needed, which ends up probably being more expensive, to be quite honest. So a very interesting shift in place to start thinking about as that CFO starts looking at the numbers and starts putting pressure on having this remote work environment be more of a permanent setting going forward, even after there's no particular disease-based or recession-based need for it. So based on this, that's just an introduction to the frameworks we've been working on. Obviously, there's a lot more to think about here, and we have a series of 9 additional webinars that we'll be putting on over the next 4.5 weeks, looking at everything from telecom expenses to wireless expenses and dealing with smartphones in the tween years, managing SaaS expenses, looking at infrastructure as a service and the overwhelming detail that exists in trying to manage those costs. I come from a telecom background. I used to think our telecom bills and CDRs and customer records were big data, and then I started working in the cloud a few years ago and found that those bills and and that usage is 1,000 times bigger. It's definitely extremely challenging to figure out. Moving on, we're going to be looking at benchmarking TEM metrics. So figuring out your technology expense environment, how do you benchmark that, and how do you make sure that you are working within the right cost parameters to make this effective. And then we're going to look at tactical issues around IT inventory, payment and invoice processing, managing service orders, and then finally managing IT finance and figuring out what to do next once you have all these pieces in place. And all this is leading up to our TEM Expo virtual event in June, which I hope you attend. We're providing free passes for all qualified IT, finance, and accounting and procurement professionals who are dealing with this kind of problem, and we're going to provide a few goodies as well. So please feel free to sign up for that and get your gift box, get your education, be prepared for 2020. And with that, that's all I had for today. I just wanted to make this a quick hit and give you an idea of where to start. But we're going to be going into a lot more detail over the next few weeks. If you have any questions about this webinar, or if you have any questions about what else where else you should go next, or want a more personalized inquiry time on this topic, please feel free to follow up with us. And I'm here to help. This is a tough time, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, and I'm hoping to have a lot more, because this is a time to get educated and learn more about how to do this right. So I'm looking forward to being here as a resource and helping you over the next few weeks. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.